I'm Marion, 61 years old, a retired nurse living in a crumbling apartment with leaking pipes and cracked walls, when I discovered my daughter Samantha had purchased a beautiful new house for her mother-in-law Barbara. While I continued to live in these deteriorating conditions, my heart shattered into pieces. The contrast between my situation and Barbara's lavish gift left me feeling invisible and worthless to my own daughter. If you're watching this video, please hit like and subscribe to follow how I turned my pain into power when I realized exactly what I needed to do to reclaim my dignity and worth. My life before this heartbreaking discovery was one of sacrifice and dedication. For 35 years, I worked as a registered nurse at Memorial Hospital, often pulling double shifts and working holidays to provide for my family. My husband Frank and I weren't wealthy, but we managed to create a comfortable life for our daughter Samantha. When Frank was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer 8 years ago, our world turned upside down. Despite my medical background and desperate attempts to find experimental treatments, the disease moved quickly. Within 6 months, I became a widow at 53. The loss of Frank devastated both Samantha and me, but in some ways, it initially brought us closer. She was 26 at the time, just starting her career in marketing after graduating from Westlake University, an education we had scrimped and saved to provide. I had always been proud of how we managed to send her to such a prestigious school despite our modest income. Frank and I had started a college fund when she was born, and I picked up extra weekend shifts for years to ensure she could attend her dream school without crushing student loan debt. Before Samantha met Matthew, she and I had a relationship I treasured. Every Sunday, we would have brunch together at our favorite local cafe. Twice a month, we'd go shopping at the mall, not always buying much, but enjoying each other's company. We would text almost daily, sharing funny stories, seeking advice, or simply checking in. When something exciting happened in her life, I was among the first to know. When she faced disappointments, she would often end up on my couch with a pint of ice cream as we talked through her feelings. Matthew entered the picture about 5 years ago. They met at a charity gala for the hospital where he works as a neurosurgeon. Matthew comes from a very different background than ours. His mother, Barbara, is the former CEO of Elite Properties, one of the largest real estate development companies in the state. She's well-connected, polished, and accustomed to a lifestyle I could never provide for Samantha. From the beginning, Barbara welcomed Samantha into their world of country club memberships, exotic vacations, and social events with influential people. Matthew, an only child like Samantha, was clearly very close to his mother. Barbara was widowed as well, though under different circumstances. Her husband had left her financially secure, unlike my situation after Frank's death. I noticed the changes in Samantha gradually after she began dating Matthew. Our Sunday brunches became less frequent, often canceled at the last minute because she was invited to the country club with Matthew and Barbara. When we did meet, our conversations shifted. Instead of our usual intimate talks, Samantha would speak about charity galas, golf lessons, and the latest designer fashion Barbara had introduced her to. Mom, Barbara says every woman needs a good set of pearls. She took me shopping yesterday and helped me pick out my first strand. Samantha told me once, proudly displaying a necklace that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I smiled and admired the pearls, swallowing the comment that I still wore the simple pearl earrings Frank had given me for our 10th anniversary, the only piece of fine jewelry I owned. When Samantha and Matthew got engaged after 2 years of dating, Barbara immediately took control of the wedding planning. She hired an exclusive wedding planner, reserved a venue that normally had a 3-year waiting list, and connected Samantha with a designer for a custom wedding gown. While I was included in some of the planning activities, I often felt like an observer rather than the mother of the bride. "Don't worry about contributing financially, Marion," Barbara told me during one of the planning meetings. "Matthew and I have this covered. Just enjoy the process." Her words were kind on the surface, but they highlighted the financial disparity between us and effectively sidelined me from many decisions. The wedding was beautiful, but felt more like a showcase of Barbara's connections than a celebration of my daughter's love. After the wedding, my financial situation began to deteriorate. The medical bills from Frank's illness had depleted most of our savings, and though I had my nursing pension, rising costs made it increasingly difficult to maintain my standard of living. I had to downgrade from our family home to an apartment in a less desirable area of town. The apartment building, managed by a neglectful landlord, had numerous problems that worsened over time. The pipes in the bathroom leaked constantly, creating water stains on the ceiling. During heavy rain, water would seep through cracks in the walls. The heating system worked sporadically during winter months, forcing me to wear layers indoors and use space heaters that drove up my electric bill. Despite these hardships, I hesitated to share the extent of my struggles with Samantha. She was building her new life with Matthew, and I didn't want to burden her with my problems or appear needy. When she did visit my apartment, I would prepare for days in advance, temporarily fixing what I could, using air fresheners to mask the smell of mildew and arranging furniture to hide the worst water damage. "The place looks cozy, Mom," she would say during her increasingly rare visits, though I could see her discomfort when she spotted a new water stain or heard the pipes rattling. I would simply smile and change the subject, asking about her job or their latest vacation, rather than revealing how the landlord had ignored my fifth request to fix the leaking bathroom ceiling, or how I had developed a persistent cough from the mold growing in the corners of my bedroom. Pride kept me silent, but in retrospect, my silence allowed Samantha to remain unaware of just how difficult my circumstances had become. Perhaps if I had been more open about my struggles, what happened next might have unfolded differently. But as a mother, I wanted to protect her from worry and never wanted her to feel responsible for my well-being. This protective instinct, however misguided, would soon lead to one of the most painful experiences of my life. The first clear sign that Samantha and Matthew prioritized Barbara came about a year after their wedding. They purchased their first home, a beautiful four-bedroom colonial in an upscale neighborhood. When they invited me over for a housewarming dinner, I arrived with a houseplant and a framed photo of the couple as gifts, excited to see their new home. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Barbara's luxury sedan already parked there. Inside, I found Barbara comfortably directing Samantha on where to place various decorative items she had apparently purchased for them. "Oh, Marion, you're here," Barbara said, barely looking up from the crystal vase she was positioning on the dining room table. "Samantha, darling, show your mother around while I finish setting up the centerpieces." The tour revealed that Barbara had been deeply involved in decorating the house. Many of the furnishings were gifts from her, and she had even arranged for an interior designer friend to help with the color scheme and layout. "Barbara has been so generous," Samantha gushed. "She knew exactly what would work in each space." What struck me most during that visit was noticing that Barbara had her own key to the house, which she used casually when she stepped out to retrieve more decorative items from her car. When I mentioned it later, Samantha dismissed my concern. "It's just easier this way, Mom. She often drops by with groceries or things for the house when we're at work." During subsequent family gatherings at their home, Barbara's influence became increasingly apparent. She was always present, often arriving early to help prepare meals based on Matthew's favorite childhood recipes. Dinner conversations revolved around topics from Barbara's social circle charity work or family vacations to exclusive resorts I had only seen in magazines. When I would try to contribute to these conversations or share stories from my nursing days, I noticed how quickly the subject would change or how Samantha would give Matthew a certain look before steering the discussion in another direction. "Mom was just telling me about this wonderful book club she's joined." Samantha would interject, cutting off my story about an interesting patient case to redirect the conversation to something Barbara had introduced her to. Within a few months of moving into their new home, Samantha began adopting more of Barbara's interests and habits. She joined Barbara's exclusive book club, started playing golf at Barbara's country club, and volunteered for the hospital charity board that Barbara chaired. When we did manage to have our increasingly rare mother-daughter lunches, Samantha would speak enthusiastically about these activities. "Barbara has been teaching me golf. She says it's essential for networking in this town," or "Barbara introduced me to her philanthropic circle. You wouldn't believe the connections I've made through her." Each time she mentioned Barbara's name, which was often, I felt a small piece of our bond chip away. The daughter who once shared everything with me now seemed to seek guidance and approval, primarily from her mother-in-law. The pattern continued with holiday celebrations. While I was always invited to Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners, they were invariably held at either Barbara's home or Samantha and Matthew's house, with Barbara taking the lead on planning the menu and activities. My offers to host were gently declined with excuses about my apartment being too small or too far from where most of the guests lived. "It's just more convenient this way, Mom," Samantha would explain. "Barbara's house has the space for everyone and she loves hosting." During these gatherings, I often found myself feeling like an outsider, looking in on a family I wasn't fully part of. Barbara, Matthew, and Samantha shared inside jokes and references to events I hadn't been included in. They discussed vacation plans and weekend activities that I only heard about after they had occurred. Meanwhile, my living conditions continued to deteriorate. The water damage in my bathroom worsened, with the ceiling developing an ominous bulge that dripped continuously during rainy days. Black mold began creeping along the walls despite my efforts to clean it with bleach. The building's heating system failed completely during one particularly cold January, leaving me to rely solely on space heaters for nearly 2 weeks before a partial repair was made. Each time I reported these issues to the property management company, I received the same response: "We'll add it to the maintenance list." Weeks would pass with no action. My follow-up calls met with excuses about budget constraints or staffing shortages. When a particularly heavy rainfall caused water to pour through my living room ceiling, creating a dangerous situation with the electrical wiring, I made an emergency call to both the landlord and Samantha. The landlord promised to send someone as soon as possible, which I had learned meant days, not hours. Samantha, however, canceled our plans to have lunch the following day. I'm so sorry, Mom, but Barbara organized a special tour of the new hospital wing for the donor committee and I can't miss it. Can we reschedule for next week? I hope the ceiling issue gets fixed quickly. I spent that night in a cheap motel, unable to stay in my apartment due to the electrical hazard while my daughter attended a social event with her mother-in-law. As I lay awake in the lumpy motel bed, I couldn't help but wonder when Barbara's needs and wants had begun to consistently supersede mine in Samantha's priorities. The next morning, I returned to my apartment to find that the maintenance man had placed a bucket under the leak and promised to return sometime next week to properly address the issue. As I cleaned up the water damage as best I could, I received a text from Samantha with photos of her and Barbara at the hospital event, both elegantly dressed and smiling broadly with the caption, "Great day with my amazing mother-in-law." The words stung more than I cared to admit. While I didn't expect or want Samantha to dislike Barbara, the constant evidence of their close bond highlighted the growing distance in my own relationship with my daughter. It wasn't just about Barbara being prioritized. It was about feeling as though I was becoming increasingly peripheral in my daughter's life, my needs and circumstances barely registering on her radar. The revelation that truly broke my heart came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. After another frustrating conversation with my landlord about the persistent leaks and mold, I was scrolling through Facebook, seeking a distraction from my problems. That's when I saw Samantha's post that would change everything. The photo showed Barbara standing proudly in front of a beautiful single-story ranch house holding a set of keys. Samantha and Matthew flanked her, all three beaming with joy. The caption read, "So excited to surprise the most amazing woman with her dream retirement home. Mom B deserves nothing but the best for all she's done for us. Blessed with the best, Mill, new beginnings, retirement dreams." I stared at the screen in disbelief, my hands trembling as I zoomed in on the image. The house was stunning with a manicured lawn-stone facade and large windows. In the background, I could see glimpses of what appeared to be a spacious kitchen with new appliances and granite countertops. Reading through the comments, I learned more details that each felt like a fresh wound. "It has the open concept living area you've always wanted, Mom," Samantha had replied to one comment. "4 bedrooms so you can have a dedicated craft room and a guest room for when we stay over," she wrote in another response. "The backyard is perfect for those garden parties you love to host. Wait until you see the patio." As I continued scrolling through the comments and responses, my confusion and hurt deepened. This major life event, this significant financial investment, had never been mentioned to me. Not once had Samantha indicated they were house hunting for Barbara or planning such an extravagant gift. The realization that my daughter had kept something so substantial completely secret from me while I lived in increasingly dangerous conditions felt like the ultimate betrayal. With shaking hands, I dialed Samantha's number. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. "Hey, Mom, can I call you back? We're just finishing up dinner at Barbara's new place." "I saw your post," I said quietly, struggling to keep my voice steady, "about Barbara's new house." "Oh." Samantha's tone brightened. "Isn't it amazing? We've been planning it for months. She had no idea. You should have seen her face when we gave her the keys." "Months." I repeated the word, catching in my throat. "You've been planning this for months and never mentioned it to me." There was a pause followed by some muffled conversation in the background. "Hold on, Mom, let me step outside so we can talk." After a moment, Samantha returned to the phone. "Is everything okay? You sound upset." "I'm upset, Samantha." I admitted, a dam of emotion breaking inside me. "I just found out my daughter bought a house for her mother-in-law while I'm living with leaking pipes and mold. The ceiling in my bathroom is literally falling apart. Did you not think that might be something worth mentioning to me?" Samantha's voice turned defensive. "Mom, those are 2 completely different situations. Barbara needed a safer place without stairs since she's getting older. Her old house had that steep staircase, and we were worried about her falling." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Barbara was 58, 3 years younger than me, and was an avid tennis player who regularly posted about her hiking adventures. "And what about my situation, Samantha? Do you think living with water damage and mold is safe for me?" "I didn't realize it was that bad," she replied, her voice softening slightly. "You always make it seem like the problems are minor and being taken care of." "Because I didn't want to burden you," I said, tears now flowing freely. "But I never thought you'd buy another woman a house while I'm living like this." "Mom, it's not like that," Samantha protested. "Matthew wanted to do this for his mother. It was important to him and I supported his decision." "And what about your mother? Where do I fall on your list of priorities?" The line went quiet for a moment before Samantha spoke again, her voice strained. That's not fair. We can't afford to buy houses for everyone. I'm not everyone, Samantha. I'm your mother, I said, my voice breaking. The mother who worked double shifts to put you through college. The mother who raised you alone after your father died. Look, Mom, I can't talk about this right now. We're in the middle of Barbara's housewarming dinner. Can we discuss this tomorrow? That dismissal, that casual pushing aside of my pain to continue celebrating with Barbara was the final straw. Enjoy your dinner, I said coldly before hanging up. I sat in my darkened living room phone clutched in my hand as tears streamed down my face. The contrast between my life and Barbara's couldn't have been more stark. While she was being presented with a dream retirement home complete with craft room and garden patio, I was using buckets to catch the water leaking through my ceiling. As if to emphasize this point, a new leak suddenly developed directly above where I sat. Cold water dripped onto my head, then began streaming more steadily. I moved away just as a section of the bathroom ceiling finally gave way, completely collapsing into the tub with a thunderous crash that sent water and debris everywhere. Standing in the doorway, surveying the destruction of my bathroom, I felt something shift inside me. The sadness and hurt were still there, but something else was emerging: determination. This couldn't continue. Something had to change, and since no one else seemed willing to help me, I would have to help myself. That night, as I slept on my couch, unable to use the destroyed bathroom, I made a decision. I would no longer be the invisible mother, the afterthought, the person whose needs came last. It was time to reclaim my dignity and my life with or without my daughter's help. The morning after my devastating discovery and the bathroom ceiling collapse, I called my friend Carol, one of the few people who truly understood my situation. We arranged to meet at our favorite coffee shop, a small, quiet place where we could talk privately. Carol had been my friend since nursing school over 40 years ago. Unlike me, she had continued working part-time after reaching retirement age, keeping her skills sharp and her financial situation more stable. When I arrived at the coffee shop, she took one look at my face and immediately pulled me into a hug. "You look terrible," she said bluntly as we sat down with our coffees. "What happened?" I showed her Samantha's Facebook post and recounted our phone conversation from the previous night, along with the ceiling collapse that followed. Carol's expression darkened as I spoke, her initial sympathy giving way to indignation on my behalf. "That's outrageous," she declared when I finished. "How could Samantha be so blind to your situation while lavishing such attention on her mother-in-law?" I sighed, running my finger around the rim of my coffee cup. I partly blame myself. I never wanted to burden her with my problems. I kept thinking the landlord would eventually fix things, and I didn't want her to worry. "Marion," Carol said firmly, "you've spent your entire life putting others first. You did it as a nurse, you did it as a wife when Frank was sick, and you've done it as a mother. At some point, you need to advocate for yourself. Samantha needs to understand the reality of your situation." "But how?" I asked. "She barely visits anymore, and when I try to talk about my problems, she changes the subject." "Show her," Carol suggested. "Invite her over. Don't clean up or hide anything. Let her see exactly how you're living. Sometimes people need to see things with their own eyes before they truly understand." The idea was terrifying but necessary. For too long, I had hidden the worst of my circumstances, presenting a brave face to the world. It was time for honesty, however uncomfortable. That afternoon, I called Samantha and asked her to come to my apartment the following day. To my surprise, she agreed readily, perhaps feeling guilty about our previous conversation. "I'll come around 11, she said. "We can talk then." I spent that night at Carol's place, unable to stay in my apartment with the bathroom in its current state. When I returned the next morning, I deliberately left everything as it was: the collapsed ceiling, the mold on the walls, the buckets catching leaks, the space heaters trying to combat the cold spots where the heating system failed to reach. This was my reality, and it was time for Samantha to see it. When the doorbell rang at 11 sharp, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Samantha stood there, looking polished in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, her expression a mixture of concern and wariness. "Mom," she began, but her words died in her throat as she stepped inside and took in the state of my apartment. Her eyes widened as she noticed the water stains on the walls, the peeling paint, and the musty smell that no amount of air freshener could mask. "What happened to the ceiling?" she gasped, looking into the bathroom where the collapse was most visible. "It finally gave way last night, right after our phone call," I explained calmly. "I've been reporting leaks to the landlord for months, but they never make proper repairs, just temporary patches that fail again with the next rain." Samantha moved slowly through the apartment, taking in details. I'm sure she had never noticed during her brief, infrequent visits: the mold growing in corners, the warped floorboards, the windows that didn't close properly, letting in drafts and occasionally rain. "Mom, I had no idea it was this bad," she said finally, her voice small and shocked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried in my way," I replied, "but you're busy with your life with Matthew and Barbara. I didn't want to be a burden." Samantha's face flushed. I would have helped if I knew. Would you? I asked quietly. You and Matthew just spent what must have been hundreds of thousands of dollars on a house for Barbara. Did it ever occur to you that I might need help too? She sat down heavily on my worn sofa, looking genuinely distressed. We used most of our savings on Barbara's house. Matthew really wanted to do this for her. She's done so much for us. And what have I done, Samantha? I asked, my voice steady despite the pain in my heart. Who worked double shifts to put you through college? Who sat with you all night when you had your tonsils removed? Who taught you to drive, to cook, to stand up for yourself? Tears filled her eyes. You did, Mom. You've always been there for me. Until recently, it seems I wasn't a priority in your life anymore. I said, finally voicing the hurt I'd been carrying. Barbara gets a house. I get occasional phone calls that you're too busy to make in person. Samantha wiped her eyes, looking around the apartment again with fresh awareness. I'm so sorry, Mom. I just got caught up in Matthew's world and trying to fit in with his family. Barbara has all these connections and influence, and I wanted to be part of that. I understand the appeal, I acknowledged. But in embracing her world so completely, you left me behind. We talked for over an hour more honestly than we had in years. Samantha admitted that she had been trying to win Barbara's approval to secure her place in Matthew's family by becoming the daughter Barbara had always wanted. In doing so, she had taken me for granted, assuming I would always be there, always understanding, always self-sufficient. As our conversation wound down, Samantha looked at me seriously. We need to get you out of this place, Mom. It's not safe or healthy. I agree, but I can't afford much else right now, I said. That's when Samantha made her suggestion. Barbara's old house is sitting empty. She's planning to sell it, but we could talk to her about you moving in temporarily. The offer, though well-intentioned, felt like salt in a wound. Barbara's old house was a 2-story colonial in an affluent neighborhood far from my friends and community. More importantly, the idea of accepting Barbara's cast-off home living in a space she had discarded for something better felt humiliating. That's very thoughtful, I said carefully, but I don't think that would work for me. It's too far from my friends and doctors, and the 2-story layout would be difficult as I get older. But Mom, it would be a huge improvement over this place, Samantha insisted. Maybe so, but it wouldn't be my home, I explained. It would be another reminder that Barbara comes first and I get what's left over. Samantha looked hurt by my refusal, clearly not understanding why I couldn't just accept this solution. I'm trying to help, Mom. I know you are, honey, I said gently. But I need to find my own solution, not move into Barbara's leftovers. The conversation ended awkwardly, with Samantha promising to think about other options and to talk to Matthew about how they might help. As she left, she hugged me tightly, murmuring apologies that seemed sincere but somehow inadequate given the magnitude of what had happened. After she drove away, I stood in my doorway looking at the apartment that had become more of a trap than a home. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not wait for Samantha or anyone else to rescue me. I would rescue myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. The apartment felt more oppressive than ever, the dripping from the newly formed leaks creating a persistent rhythm that matched my racing thoughts. By dawn, I had reached a resolution. It was time to take control of my life again. I sat at my small kitchen table with a notebook cataloging my skills and experiences, 35 years as a registered nurse, including 10 years managing the emergency department at Memorial Hospital. I had trained countless new nurses, implemented efficiency protocols that were adopted hospital-wide, and earned commendations for my work during several public health crises. These weren't just memories, they were qualifications, skills that still had value even if I had officially retired. With newfound determination, I called Sarah Jenkins, a former colleague who had left nursing to start a healthcare consulting business 5 years earlier. She had reached out when I retired, suggesting I might want to join her team part-time, but I had declined, feeling I needed a complete break after Frank's illness and death. "Marion," Sarah exclaimed when she heard my voice, "what a wonderful surprise! I'm wondering if that consulting offer is still open," I said, getting straight to the point. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. In fact, I could use someone with your experience right now. We're developing training programs for hospitals transitioning to new emergency response protocols. Your background would be perfect." We discussed the details: 20 hours per week, mostly remote work with occasional on-site training sessions, and a salary that was nearly double my pension. The position would start in 2 weeks, giving me time to sort out my living situation. With potential income secured, I turned to my housing problem. Through a community legal aid center, I connected with a tenant rights attorney who reviewed my situation pro bono. After seeing photos of the apartment and copies of my numerous maintenance requests, he was confident we had a strong case against the landlord. "You have 2 options," the attorney explained. "We can fight for repairs and compensation for living in uninhabitable conditions, or we can use these violations to break your lease without penalty and recover your security deposit." Given the extent of the damage, I'd recommend the latter. I chose to leave. No amount of repairs could erase the memories of feeling trapped and neglected in that apartment. With the attorney's help, I drafted a formal letter to the property management company outlining the numerous code violations and giving them 24 hours to address the hazardous conditions or release me from the lease without penalty. Their response came quickly, clearly motivated by fear of legal action and potential inspections that might reveal problems in other units. They agreed to terminate my lease immediately and return my full security deposit, even adding an additional month's rent as compensation provided I signed a non-disclosure agreement about the conditions. With my housing situation resolving, I focused on finding a new place to live. My budget was still limited until the consulting income started, but with my security deposit being returned and the extra compensation, I had enough for a fresh start. After viewing several apartments, I found a small but well-maintained one-bedroom unit in a building specifically designed for seniors. It was nothing fancy, but it was clean, safe, and had responsive management. The rent was within my budget, especially with my new income, and it was located in a pleasant neighborhood with easy access to public transportation and shopping. Over the next week, I focused on the practical aspects of moving. I donated or discarded items damaged by water and mold, keeping only what was truly important or necessary. The process was both cathartic and empowering. Each item I chose to leave behind felt like shedding a piece of my former helplessness. For my new apartment, I wanted a fresh start in every sense. Instead of spending money on new furniture, I scoured thrift stores and estate sales, finding quality pieces at affordable prices. A comfortable armchair with good back support, a solid oak dining table with 2 chairs, a nearly new mattress still in its protective wrapping. Sarah advanced me part of my first month's consulting pay, which I used to purchase fresh bedding towels and kitchen essentials. I spent a weekend painting the apartment in soft, cheerful colors the management had approved, covering the stark white walls with gentle blues and warm creams. Through all of this, I deliberately didn't tell Samantha about my plans. Part of me wanted to show her I could handle my own problems just as I had throughout my life. Another part, the wounded mother in me, wanted her to experience a fraction of the shock I had felt when discovering Barbara's new house. By the end of 2 weeks, the transformation was complete. I had moved from a deteriorating, hazardous apartment to a safe, pleasant home that reflected my personality and needs. I had secured meaningful work that valued my experience and skills, and I had done it all on my own without relying on my daughter or her wealthy in-laws. As I arranged fresh flowers in a vase on my new dining table, a housewarming gift to myself, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pride. Not the pride I had always felt in Samantha's accomplishments, but pride in myself, in my resilience and capability. Now it was time to show Samantha what her mother was truly made of. A month after moving into my new apartment and starting my consulting position, I decided it was time to reveal my transformation to Samantha. I hadn't spoken to her since her visit to my old apartment, though she had texted a few times asking how I was doing and mentioning that she and Matthew were working on something to help me. I had responded politely, but vaguely, never giving away that I had completely changed my circumstances. I called Samantha on a Friday evening, knowing both she and Matthew would likely be home. "I need your help with something at my apartment," I said when she answered. "Could you and Matthew stop by tomorrow afternoon?" "Of course, Mom," she replied, concern evident in her voice. "Has the ceiling gotten worse? Do you need us to talk to the landlord?" "Just come by around 2," I said, not answering her questions directly. "I'll text you the address." "The address? Did you move?" she asked, confused. "I'll explain everything tomorrow," I promised, ending the call before she could ask more questions. The next day, I prepared a simple tea with homemade cookies, setting everything on my new dining table by the window that overlooked a small community garden. At precisely 2 o'clock, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Samantha and Matthew stood there looking concerned and slightly confused, clearly expecting to find me in some sort of distress. Instead, they were confronted with the sight of me well-dressed and smiling, standing in the doorway of an apartment they'd never seen before. "Mom." Samantha looked past me into the apartment, taking in the fresh paint, new furniture, and overall pleasant atmosphere. "What's going on? Where are we?" "Welcome to my new home," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. "And my new life." Their confusion was evident as they slowly walked through the apartment, noting the bright, clean bathroom with its properly functioning shower, the small but efficient kitchen with new appliances, and the comfortable living area with a view of the garden. "I don't understand," Samantha said, finally, turning to face me. "When did all this happen? How did you afford it?" I gestured for them to sit at the dining table where I served tea and cookies before joining them. "After you saw the condition of my old apartment, I realized I couldn't wait for someone else to solve my problems, so I took matters into my own hands." I explained everything: the consulting position with Sarah, the legal help to break my lease, finding the new apartment, and furnishing it on a budget. As I spoke, I watched Samantha's expression shift from confusion to surprise, and finally to something that looked like respect. Matthew, who had remained largely silent, was the first to speak when I finished. Marion, this is impressive. You've accomplished all of this in just a month. I did, I confirmed. It turns out I'm still quite capable of taking care of myself. But why didn't you tell us? Samantha asked, hurt evident in her voice. We were trying to figure out how to help you. For the same reason you didn't tell me about buying Barbara a house, I replied calmly. Some decisions we make on our own. The directness of my response clearly caught Samantha off guard. She flushed slightly, looking down at her teacup. That's different. We wanted it to be a surprise for Barbara. And I wanted my independence to be a surprise for you, I countered. To show you that while your focus has been on Barbara and her needs, I've been solving my own problems just as I've done my entire life. Matthew shifted uncomfortably in his seat, looking genuinely chagrined. Marion, I want to apologize. I didn't realize how bad your situation was, and I was so focused on doing something special for my mother that I didn't consider your needs. That was selfish and short-sighted of me. His apology seemed sincere, and I appreciated that he took responsibility without being prompted. Samantha, however, still seemed to be processing the situation. I feel terrible, Mom, she finally said. When we saw your old apartment, Matthew and I talked about helping you find a better place, maybe even buying you a condo. We were actually looking at listings, but you did all this before we could even present the idea. Because I needed to do this for myself, I explained. For too long, I've felt invisible in your life, Samantha. Second best compared to Barbara. Less important, less valuable. That's not true, she protested. Isn't it? I asked gently. When was the last time you canceled plans with Barbara to spend time with me? When was the last time you called me just to chat? Not because you needed something or felt obligated. When was the last time you bragged about me on social media the way you constantly praise Barbara? Tears filled Samantha's eyes as my words hit home. I never meant to make you feel that way. It's just, Barbara has this perfect life, this way of making everyone want to be around her. She has connections and influence, and I wanted to be part of that world. I understand the appeal, I acknowledged, but in pursuing her approval so intently, you neglected our relationship. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like what I could offer wasn't valuable compared to what Barbara provides. Matthew reached over and took Samantha's hand. She's right, Sam. We've been so wrapped up in my mother's world that we've taken your mom for granted. That stops now. For the next hour, we had the most honest conversation we'd shared in years. Samantha admitted that she had been trying to impress Barbara to secure her place in Matthew's family through his mother's approval. Matthew confessed that he had always taken his mother's financial support for granted and had never really considered that my situation might be different. I grew up with wealth, he explained. It's easy to forget that not everyone has that safety net. I should have been more aware, more considerate. As our conversation progressed, I made it clear that while I appreciated their concern, I wasn't looking for financial handouts or to be rescued. What I wanted was respect, consideration, and to be valued as an important part of their lives on equal footing with Barbara. I propose a new arrangement, I suggested. Once a week, we have dinner together, rotating between our 3 homes. My place, your house, and Barbara's new home, equal time, equal importance. Samantha nodded eagerly. That sounds perfect. And Mom, I promise to make more effort to spend time with just you two. No more canceling our plans when Barbara suggests something else. As they prepared to leave, Samantha hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Mom. You're amazing, and I'm sorry I lost sight of that. Matthew hugged me too, a gesture that surprised me given our typically formal relationship. Thank you for the wake-up call, Marion. We needed it. After they left, I sat by my window watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the community garden. For the first time in years, I felt truly seen by my daughter and son-in-law, not as a problem to be solved or an obligation to be managed, but as a capable, valuable person whose relationship deserved nurturing. The path forward wouldn't be perfect, and old habits wouldn't change overnight. But I had found my voice and my power, and I had no intention of losing them again. 6 months have passed since that afternoon when I surprised Samantha and Matthew with my new apartment and life. The changes in our family dynamic have been significant, though not without occasional challenges and adjustments. My consulting work with Sarah's company has flourished beyond my initial expectations. What began as a part-time position quickly evolved into a more substantial role when hospital administrators recognized the value of my 4 decades of nursing experience. I now lead training workshops for emergency department staff across 3 major hospitals, helping to implement new protocols that improve patient care while supporting staff well-being. The financial security from this work has allowed me to make my apartment truly my own. I've added personal touches like framed photographs from my nursing career, potted plants that thrive on my sunny windowsill, and a comfortable reading nook where I spend peaceful evenings with books I never had time to enjoy during my working years. More importantly, my relationship with Samantha has undergone a remarkable transformation. True to her word, she has made consistent efforts to spend time with me independently of Barbara. Our mother-daughter brunches have been reinstated as a bi-weekly tradition, and she calls regularly just to chat about her day or seek my advice on work challenges. The most significant change, however, has been in how Samantha balances her relationships with Barbara and me. She no longer automatically prioritizes her mother-in-law's invitations or needs over mine. When conflicts arise, she makes fair decisions rather than defaulting to Barbara's preferences. Our rotating dinner arrangement has been particularly effective in reshaping family dynamics. Every Sunday, we gather for dinner with the location rotating between my apartment, Samantha and Matthew's house, and Barbara's new home. Initially, these dinners were somewhat awkward, especially the first one at my place where Barbara clearly felt out of her element in my modest but comfortable apartment. I remember Barbara's expression as she entered my home that first time, looking around with barely concealed surprise at my simple furnishings and limited space. "It's very cozy," she had commented, clearly struggling to find something positive to say. Rather than feeling defensive, I had smiled and replied, "It's exactly what I need at this stage of my life. Manageable, comfortable, and filled with things that bring me joy." The first time we dined at Barbara's new house, I experienced a moment of envy at the spacious, beautifully decorated rooms and expansive garden. But that feeling quickly faded as I observed Barbara fluttering around nervously, seeming almost desperate to impress everyone with her perfect home. Behind her polished exterior, I glimpsed something unexpected: insecurity. This revelation led to one of the most surprising developments of the past 6 months, the beginning of a genuine, if somewhat tentative friendship between Barbara and me. It started during our third rotation of Sunday dinners, when Barbara and I found ourselves alone in her kitchen as she prepared coffee and I arranged cookies on a serving plate. "Samantha seems different lately," Barbara commented, measuring coffee beans into her grinder. "More confident, more settled." "I've noticed that too," I agreed. Barbara hesitated before continuing. "She told me what happened, about your old apartment and how she realized she'd been neglecting your relationship while trying to impress me." I wasn't sure how to respond, but Barbara surprised me by continuing, "I never meant for that to happen. In fact, I've always felt a bit like I was competing for her attention, trying to be the perfect mother-in-law so she would accept me into her life." Her admission startled me. "You were competing with me. I thought it was the other way around." Barbara laughed softly. "I suppose we were both feeling insecure in different ways. You were her mother first, you raised her. I was just trying to find my place in her life without stepping on your toes." That conversation marked a turning point in our relationship. We began to see each other not as rivals for Samantha's affection, but as two women who cared deeply about her happiness. While we would never be best friends, we developed a mutual respect that made family gatherings more comfortable and genuine. As Barbara and I found a more balanced relationship, Samantha visibly relaxed, no longer feeling caught between competing maternal figures. She began to appreciate the different strengths and perspectives we each brought to her life, turning to me for emotional support and practical advice while valuing Barbara's social connections and different worldview. One particularly touching moment occurred on my birthday when Samantha and Matthew surprised me by spending the weekend helping to create a small container garden on my apartment balcony. They arrived with pot soil and a variety of plants, knowing I had always loved gardening but had limited space in my new home. As we worked together, Samantha shared stories of the vegetable garden we had tended together when she was a child, memories I thought she had forgotten. Matthew listened intently, clearly seeing a side of his wife's childhood he hadn't heard much about before. "I never realized how much you taught Mom about self-sufficiency," he commented as we planted herbs in a window box. "No wonder she was able to handle everything at work while I was traveling last month. She said she just channeled her inner Marion." That casual comment revealed how much our relationship had evolved. Samantha wasn't just spending time with me out of obligation. She was actively incorporating the values and skills I had taught her into her adult life and proudly acknowledging their source. Later that evening, as we enjoyed dinner on my balcony surrounded by our newly planted garden, Samantha raised her glass in a toast to my amazing mother who taught me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself and create the life you deserve. She then presented me with a heartfelt card containing a handwritten apology for taking me for granted and a promise to never again make me feel secondary in her life. "I'm sorry it took a wake-up call for me to realize what was happening," she wrote. "Thank you for being strong enough to show me rather than just tell me. I needed that lesson." The greatest lesson I've learned through this journey is that our value doesn't depend on how others treat us, but on how we value ourselves. For too long, I accepted being secondary in Samantha's life because I didn't assert my own worth. When I finally stood up for myself and demonstrated my capability and independence, the dynamics shifted naturally. Matthew and Samantha's relationship has also benefited from these changes. With more balanced family interactions, Matthew no longer feels torn between his mother's expectations and his wife's attempts to please her. Their marriage seems stronger, more equal as they navigate family relationships together, rather than allowing Barbara's influence to dominate. Barbara herself appears more relaxed in her role as mother-in-law, no longer feeling the need to constantly impress or control. During our most recent Sunday dinner, she confided that she had worried Samantha only spent time with her out of obligation to Matthew, and that my more authentic relationship with my daughter had made her reconsider her own approach. "I think I was trying too hard," she admitted. "Throwing money and connections at her instead of just being genuine. Watching you two together has been enlightening. The journey hasn't been perfect. There are still occasions when old patterns emerge, when Samantha momentarily slips back into prioritizing Barbara's wishes, or when I catch myself feeling resentful of their closeness. But now we have the tools and awareness to recognize and address these moments before they escalate. The greatest gift of this experience has been reclaiming my sense of self-worth and agency. I am not defined by my relationship with my daughter, my modest finances, or my comparison to Barbara. I am a whole, capable person with skills, wisdom, and value that exist independently of how others perceive me. If there's one message I would share with others facing similar family dynamics, it would be this: your worth is not determined by others' treatment of you, and it's never too late to stand up for yourself with dignity and self-respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for those who have taken you for granted, is to demonstrate your strength and independence rather than waiting to be rescued. Have you ever had to stand up for your own worth in your family? How did you handle feelings of being secondary to someone else in your child's life? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who might need this message today. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and create the relationships you deserve. Thank you for listening to my story, and may it inspire you to value yourself as much as you value others in your life.